Good afternoon and welcome everybody to the first of three lunchtime talks as part of the Agile Chambers project. My name is Harvey and I'm Chief Investigator on the mothership project, which is Agile Opera, funded by the Australian Research Council. First, I'd like to actually start off by congratulating the artists and creators of Turbulance. We've just seen a performance of that, yet another iteration of the work, which we'll be discussing in just a moment. To my left is David Young, Director for the production, Pete Humble, filmmaker, and Cynthia Troop, Librettist. And also via Skype, on a pink chair opposite me, is Juliana Hodkinson, composer, who I'm just meeting right now. Hi, Juliana, how are you? So, congratulations to all. Here we go. So this afternoon we have the opportunity for, and also Steph and Deb Kayser as well, who are involved with the project. Going off my notes, very detailed notes on the back of this piece of sheet. Thank you and well done to everybody. The coming together of everybody for this project for the actual original creators of the world, the original versions of the work now goes back some years, but it was only this Saturday that everybody managed to get together again to start working through the version of the work that we've just seen. One of the activities we started off with on Saturday was to do a debrief of the most recent performance of the work, which was in Lawn in September. And I thought we might start back at that point where we took the opportunity for the creators to go back through and to, as I said, conduct a debrief out of that particular production. Because one of the things that's happening with these works, which we're looking at through the research project, is the way in which they become mobile. They can be remounted either in whole or in reconstituted parts, or in fact quite different versions and different contexts. And so there's this real mobility to the works, which in some ways I think we could go back and say, well, it's embedded in the notion of the living room opera, that it moves out from the living room into other spaces. And this is what we're looking to investigate through the remountings that we're looking at in the gallery this week. So what I thought I might do is just ask David, Pete and Cynthia, maybe just to recap a few of the ideas that we touched on Saturday of their experiences of the Lawn performance in September, and what were some of the aesthetic, creative, technical issues that came out of that remounting in September.
Sure. Shall we discuss this? So one of the key questions that came out of our Lawn presentation, we basically had a film and we kind of did a karaoke version where at times Deborah, we also had Annalie, the other performer there, at times they doubled with the film or they lip synced, and there were some beautiful things that we found during that process. But one of the main consequences of that was this kind of set and forget effect. In terms of the audience really sitting there and getting a feeling of like, oh, right, this is just a film that's going to run. And so they started checking their phones and, not basically disengaging. So that was one of the key things that we wanted to try and grapple with a little bit here. And we used this very rough and ready mute and pause kind of strategy in order to enable and empower Deborah to intervene into not just the soundscape or the sonic material, but also into the timeline. And I thought it worked really well. As a very, very simple device, I think it just dropped in this element of danger, or at least unexpectedness, or a sense of, okay, we don't exactly know what's going to happen, and we can't entirely rely on the fact that this is just going to, this recording is just going to keep running untouched or uninterrupted. But how did you guys feel? We'll just hear from maybe Cynthia first.
Oh,
Before
thanks,
we take
David.
questions.
I mean, I think connected with that sense of us wanting to avoid this atmosphere that the audience seems to have picked up in Lawn, that the film was predominantly the focus and the driver and the nature of the work, was also this sense of what we did in Lawn was we did our best to draw focus to the two live performers that we had in addition to the film. But there were many conditions that really didn't allow us to pull focus very much at all on the live performers. And we talked, when we debriefed about Lawn, the fact that in our culture at the moment, there's so much overstimulation and appeal to the visual sense that's what we're working against at Lawn. There's also the incredible aesthetic beauty of Pete's work on screen, which is justly attractive and appealing. But so what we've tried to do here at RMIT is subvert the excessive frontality. So Pete's worked incredibly hard to actually split the screens, and we've created a dynamic arrangement with a receding sightline for the screen setup. We've got a narrow aisle and 2 sets of seating banks. So we've tried to put air and dramatic dimensionality between and around the screens, between and around the audience, to restore that sense of the spatial tension between the two characters, the mother and the daughter, sitting in different places in the airline cabin but compressing the space between them through their respective sonic interventions. And I agree, David, I think it works incredibly well to give Deborah so much control and take focus, because she well deserves it with everything that she's been doing today, both the things that we rehearsed and the things that she improvised in that performance. I guess what's just worth putting on record here is that I really would have adored to see the same opportunities taken by our second character, Annalie, because I think where we would have had a real tension from behind, so from behind our seated audience right through to past the screen. So it would have meant that we actually added more dimensionality, even with respect to our live performance, which means that we've created yet again something completely new that keeps building on what we discover.
Yeah, and that was actually one of the second things that we then structurally had to address here was, well, Annalie's not here, like the performer's missing. How do we deal with that? And so there were a number of strategies that we used in terms of, creating a mother plane and a daughter plane. There's obviously the 3D printed image of statuette of Annalie, which brings her into the space. We put the chair, the kind of pointedly empty chair there, and also some text, some stage instructions. But yeah, I mean, I think that still remains a question: is how, or is that possible or desirable at all to attempt to to find a way of representing or embodying the other performer when they're not actually here.
While I have the microphone, I'll just respond and then I'll pass the mic to others. My feeling is it's not ideal to lack the second live performer, although...
Obviously it's not ideal. I guess the question is it an interesting experiment to try and even
I think it has been
or...
interesting because it's forced us to ask the technology to do something else. So in a way, to ask the technology to play a role that often plays in normal life, which is a kind of compensatory role rather than... So if you can't meet in person, you resort to Skype, even though you'd rather meet in person. As we know with Juliana, we'd rather have her here. But there are ways in which technology can actually make something possible as opposed to nothing. So I think, for example, the use of the text on screen worked beautifully. The main response I'd have to that is there are important stage directions which did add a huge amount of drama to the live performance and which helped to structure Pete's film. And a key stage direction which literally lifts the whole work to another level is is the direction wherein, for the first time and the only time in the whole opera, the daughter and the mother are standing facing one another and they are locked in a direct gaze. And that particular image of relationality being quite direct for a moment then sets up the contrast with the mother's reverie in the aria and her mention of solitude and mention of separation. So what I felt was, if we have some text that gives us a strong image of the daughter's movements and interventions in the cabin, we need to have them all. And that's something that we didn't have time to look at, but I think it's a little bit all or nothing. Otherwise we're wondering what happened when she stood up, or did she disappear, or did she come back again. But from that technical note, I'd say I really, really enjoy the fact that the text was there, the crossfades were beautiful, and the fact that it identifies that screen with a certain space that belongs emotionally and sonically to the daughter. But I'm really interested in what Pete has to say about the text.
Yeah, no, I'm just happy that I got to try something new today. So
This was the first time we all saw the text.
We'd never done it, and
it was a world premiere.
Until this morning, I didn't even know that was going to happen. So that was fun, And in a way, I like that fact. I mean, it interests me. If we're going to do this live kind of version with the film, it sort of makes sense for me to be live as well, to have some sort of live element. So obviously if we had, the text could obviously be embedded in the image, so that would take away that live element that I did today. But yeah, for some further development, from my point of view, it's some kind of live projection element which has yet to be explored. Would make sense. So that sort of ticked that box for me today.
But this was also the first time I think you've done it as a split screen, is that right?
Oh, yeah, the film's, it's the first time it's been split. But it was kind of imagined like that from the very beginning, like putting it but not executed, that's right. So yeah, putting it to get the versions up until now, which were just a single screen split down the middle, was done because its first version was a web-based outing. And so, even though I imagined it as a dual screen, the sort of circumstances were that it had to go out into the world as a single screen work, as a film. So, it was great to get an opportunity to split the screens. Yeah.
I think in a conversation we had on the weekend, David, you mentioned that one of the other conceptions of the work in terms of discussing things like interactivity and liveness was that in fact the soprano should have a lot of control over images, over creation of the work, possibly even over sound spatialisation as well. Could you see that coming in subsequent versions?
Yeah, I wonder, should we just quickly hear from Deborah, being the soprano we keep... just Deb, some thoughts on today, on this kind of version?
The initial response is I'm not used to being in control, so it's always what would the composer like, what would the director like, and it's one of those ones in retrospect where I don't consider that I've done a reasonable job or let myself believe even halfway that until I've checked in and the director's actually happy. Oh, okay, the composer's put it, oh great, tick that box. It'll occur to me in about 6 months' time that I'm okay, not to mention, of course, the librettist being happy. So to be given the opportunity to control a show, I'm thinking, what? Who do I check in with to make sure they're okay with what I'm doing? So it is kind of risky, and, I won't speak for all sopranos, but brain in the moment. Yeah. Anyway, there were a couple of moments when I thought, oh gosh, I forgot to do that, so this is coming up. I can make this look more deliberate and tweak the moment, but yeah.
Did you feel in control?
No, I never realised I was in control of anything until months later. But that's unique to me. That's parenting, probably.
But I mean, I know from working with you for more than 20 years that very often you are there, trying to hit that cue, or you're kind of subject to the conductor or the ensemble or this, inexorable timeline. this was different.
It is different. I suppose it starts to approach a form of improvisation with known elements around you, and I guess if you do it over and over again, you start to feel freer in that and give yourself more license to go places within various parameters. So, yeah, and it's always much more fun if you've got somebody that you're working with rather than, I mean, I'm working with the technology and that's usually not a reliable mix in my life. It's enough to change a light bulb. So if Steph were playing with things as well, that'd be an interesting thing in the absence of Annalie. But with this performance today, with the absence of Annalie, in my mind, we don't actually know quite why she is absent. So we do miss that dramatic ending where the two figures were clearly on the aircraft altogether and there's that big bang backstage and we're not sure whether one's bopped the other or whether the plane pitched and we just fell on one another or one of them's concussed or why we have to emergency land. So that whole drama is not afforded to us. But Annalie's absence, it could be that she's just momentarily stepped back to the galley during the particular piece, or that she was never going to get on this flight anyway because she wasn't able to, or maybe I'm reliving a memory of something. So her absence brings many other loadings to the story. And I guess we covered that dramatic ending in her absence by bringing a drone in to sort of just change how we would end it with a deconstruction. But yeah, so it's still quite powerful with her absent, but I do miss her being in the space, dear girl. Yeah.
What occurs to me when you're talking as well is that, you know, the composer, the librettist, the director, the filmmaker indeed, even the sound and vision operator did actually hand over control, you know, within parameters. And so on the one hand, there is a great deal of trust being that we are all showing towards you. But I think it also speaks to somehow the robustness of the material. We do have this very robust, structured composition with a libretto, now a film, now a recording. You know, that we do have very robust, primarily, works which then allow us to let go of some of the other kinds of control that we would normally want to have.
I think if we were going to go in and do a season, we would probably prepare, and each, filmmaker, librettist, director would come in with a wish list and say, don't interfere with this bit, this bit, this bit, and this bit. And we'd actually probably structure it much more. And oddly enough, it would start to take its own shape and rhythm with repeated performances. But this, the involvement of having Cynthia live as a librettist to work with us at this point is a unique situation for me, because usually the librettist surrenders everything the minute they hand the libretto over, and then they have not much chop on what's happened until they rock up on opening night and think, oh gosh, look what happened to my libretto. And that goes back to the chambermaid librettists workshops and those sorts of discussions. So it's great that Synth is still with us and along for the ride to say, don't let this bit of text disappear, or can we change the inflection of how this goes, and all those things. I think if you went into a season so-called giving the soprano the controls of the plane, not really well advised, give me plenty of tips so that it's still essentially your work and it doesn't take and turn into a strange kind of aircraft.
Just on that, it's worth saying for the record as well that one of the things we wanted to try after Lawn was having Deb in a way take on some aspects of Annalie's part, in the sense that, let's recall, the opera is scored for soprano and actor. So Annalie mimics Deb singing, but she doesn't actually ever sing. She makes a lot of noise and she speaks and she does these very intense forms of iteration which have a sonic quality that's part of the palette of the work. But I was really, really thrilled to see Deb working with the microphone and repeating some of her lines, giving us full phrases so that then we could really enjoy the musical treatment and performance of those as part of her character. And I think it worked really well. And the funniest thing about that is that I'd forgotten that in the libretto there is that instruction that any line can be repeated, and it was Pete that found it and wanted to put it up on screen. So that was just a delight. It just shows how congruent our working methods have been with the original conception of the work.
So now that you've taken this particular work through a number of versions, iterations and contexts, how would you approach, say, a whole new work? Seeing some of these possibilities, would you start off thinking in a completely linear work, or would it start off modular and could be put together?
I think, so there's two things I want to say. One is that the process we've had in the last few days has been extraordinarily ambitious because we actually had three outcomes to deliver. One was, an excerpt performance, one was a performance which you've just seen, and then we're about to set up the installation version. So it's already a multifaceted, complicated work which was live and then was a film and blah, blah, blah. We sort of arrived on Saturday having to trifurcate it into these other forms. So we've been, working with those challenges, but it's been, I think, frankly, rather miraculous that we've managed to explore as much as we have. And I think that the work, I think it's interesting that I'm very clear that when we commissioned the work, and I think when Juliana and Cynthia said about creating this work, it was not imagined as a film. It was not imagined as an installation. That was actually not on our minds. It was a living room opera. So I think the first thing we would maybe do differently is think about, is this maybe going to be something else from day one? And I think that already changes how you think. It also makes me think about what Margaret Cameron would very often say to us when we were starting on a new project. And she would very often say, don't define what it is. So don't call it a play or a book or a radio piece, or, she really encouraged us to suspend that almost as a conceptual game or lever, just to kind of let it float. Of course, eventually it falls into some form. So I think that would be one thing. The other thing I wanted to say was that what I think is kind of interesting is that it started as this very live performance where everything was live, the fans and the pocket piano playing in the background and the samples being triggered, and there really was quite a flight crew making all of those sounds happen, and vocalizations and Deborah and Peanuts on microphones and whatever. Then it sort of turned into this ebook somehow, which was this purely digital thing. It was basically a film, but it was actually not a film, it was an ebook. Like, you had to go into this rather complicated Danish website and watch it as an online experience. So it kind of went from pure analog or basically, let's say, live analog performance to pure digital. And then I feel like we've kind of been wrestling it back from that, and actually just from what I've heard now as well, it's kind of like what we would like to keep doing is make it more and more live and less digital. We'd love to have, the text being projected analog, and maybe it'd be great if Pete had the original 16mm footage of the sea and we can put that on the chairs as well. It's kind of, we've kind of gone from the pendulum has swung one way, and inevitably we're wanting it to swing back the other way.
We have just a few minutes left now. Helen, I think, did you have a question earlier on?
I saw it the first time it was done. I saw it the first time it was done in Caroline's place, so I understand the power of the fans as a kind of character. The whole title of the work was Turbulance, so already there was a vibration in the air. So in terms of our sensibilities and making sense of the material and the matter, the spatial potential, all of the elements, the element of air was very important, a flight. The notions of consciousness, it kind of slips through spaces, so that kind of was present in it too. And then I'd forgotten that I'd remembered that so much, and I arrived late, both occasions. So I don't know if I'd missed something at the beginning, and I thought I was in a different work, because I was aware of what the ingredients had been. I was aware of some technical needs to try and spatialise the screens and split them. And so then I thought, okay, there's a challenge, there's a question, there's a construct that's been thrown down here now in this space. Is it, as everyone's trying to be interdisciplinary and make works that go from one format to the other, and Chambermaid, as you say, has always been creating responsive work to different architectural potentials that investigate a site or the different layout and what that place offers to the work. That all of that was in this space now. So therefore, I thought, okay, I'm in an installation. Actually, the first thing I thought I was in installation, and I could have been sitting here, or as in many installations, there's the privileged seat where you can choose where to be. This way we had a spatial design of the chairs and the aisle. I thought actually, you know, we could have had the chairs on the other side. It could have been like we could see the screens from both sides. This idea of the absent person, the other projection, which could be, there could be lots of different ways of addressing this if this is what you want. And so my question was, what do they want?
Thanks for that question, Helen. I think we'll take that as the question, because we're rapidly running out of time here. So
I could go on.
What do I want? Well, I think because we were setting it up as both a performance space and an exhibition space, it's a mixture of the two. So yes, for the next few days, it'll be a different experience in terms of you can sit, you can choose your seat, you can put your headphones. Yeah. Yeah, I think that was all. Yeah.
Any other responses from our panellists to Helen's question?
I do think that we all want an immersive experience, an experience that takes the mind of the audience into a place that has an internal congruence, and from my point of view in particular, and I might take the risk of speaking for Juliana as well, a kind of an emotional tonality that if you stay with the work, if you stay with your attention and your engagement, that actually shifts. It changes in intensity, and it changes in implications that can then be part of what we hope, really, I guess, is a sense of engagement from the point of view of each of our audiences, from their own experience. We've set up, I guess our idea was to set up a mythic space. The mother-daughter dyad is a primordial dyad, and in opera that is always brought to the fore. So we bring it to the fore, we keep finding ways to make sure it's to the fore in a way that takes at the attention of our audiences and allows for their own enriching in memory and in sensory presence to the vibrations we literally and metaphorically offer. So from my point of view, if I think about it from that perspective, I don't mind that Helen felt she was in an installation. She felt something and she stayed. And there's a lot of sonic imagery and verbal imagery and actual imagery in respect of Deb's embodiment and the shared embodiment of the audience there in those seats to lodge in the memory. And that's probably of greatest interest to me, that the work keeps having a life outside the parameters of our presence, making it in real time.
And in the interests of ensuring that life continues, what we'd like to do now is to finish this part of the discussion so that we can reset the installation version. And could you please thank our Turbulance crew who are here today. Thank you. And also to Juliana. Thank you, Juliana. And we'll wrap it up there. Thank you.